The dust rose in angry clouds behind the line of black carriages as they rolled up the dirt road toward the ranch house, and Beatrice Reeves knew exactly what they wanted before the first door even opened. She stood on her porch with her late husband's Winchester cradled in her arms, not pointing it at anyone yet, but making it clear she had it, her calico dress whipping around her legs in the hot Arizona wind that swept across the valley. It was June 1883, and the Southern Pacific Railroad had been circling her land like vultures for 6 months now, ever since they announced their plans to run a new line straight through this part of the territory between Fort McDowell and Phoenix. The lead carriage stopped about 30 feet from her house, and out stepped a portly man in a wool suit far too heavy for the Arizona heat, sweat already darkening the fabric under his arms. Behind him came 2 more men, equally overdressed, and a fourth who looked like he might actually know how to handle the revolver strapped to his hip. That one worried her more than the businessmen. "Mrs. Reeves," the portly man called out, removing his bowler hat and wiping his bald head with a handkerchief. "I am Mr. Cornelius Van Heflin, Senior Land Acquisition Officer for the Southern Pacific Railroad Company. I believe my associates have been in correspondence with you." "They have," Beatrice said, her voice carrying across the yard. "And I have told them the same thing I am telling you now. This land is not for sale." Van Heflin's smile never reached his eyes. "Mrs. Reeves, please be reasonable. We are prepared to offer you triple what this property is worth. You are a widow, alone on 3,000 acres. Surely you can see the wisdom in accepting our generous offer and relocating somewhere more suitable for a woman in your position." Beatrice felt her jaw tighten. She was 26 years old, had been running this ranch alongside her husband since she was 19, and had been running it alone since Thomas died 2 years ago from pneumonia. The idea that she could not manage it by herself made her blood boil. "My position is just fine, Mr. Van Heflin. This ranch has been in my husband's family for 23 years, and I intend to keep it that way. Now, I suggest you and your associates get back in those carriages and return to wherever you came from." The man with the gun took a step forward, but Van Heflin raised his hand slightly, stopping him. "Mrs. Reeves, I do hope you understand that the railroad is coming through this valley whether you cooperate or not. It would be in your best interest to take our offer while it still stands. We have the law on our side." "Then let the law come tell me that," Beatrice said. "Until then, you are trespassing on my property." Van Heflin's pleasant expression finally cracked, his mouth drawing into a thin line. "You are making a grave mistake, madam. The railroad always gets what it wants." "Not today," Beatrice said, and shifted the Winchester just enough that the barrel caught the sunlight. The men climbed back into their carriages, and Beatrice watched them roll back down the long drive, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Once they disappeared over the ridge, she finally allowed herself to lower the rifle, her hands shaking slightly. She was not afraid of them, not exactly, but she was intelligent enough to know that she had just made powerful enemies. She walked back into the house, setting the Winchester on the pegs above the fireplace that Thomas had installed years ago. The interior was simple but comfortable, with furniture they had built together and curtains she had sewn herself. Every inch of this place held memories, and she would be damned before she let some railroad company take it from her. That evening, as the sun began to set over the Mazatzel Mountains to the northeast, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, Beatrice sat on her porch and tried to think through her options. She had 5 ranch hands who worked for her, good men who had stayed on after Thomas died, but they were cowboys and laborers, not fighters. If the railroad decided to use force, she was not sure what she could do. The The sound of hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. A single rider approached from the east, silhouetted against the setting sun. Beatrice stood, her hand instinctively moving toward the pistol she now kept in her apron pocket, but as the rider drew closer, she recognized him. Travis Everett was the foreman at the neighboring ranch, the Circle K, which bordered her property to the north. He was a tall man in his late 20s with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that always seemed to need cutting. He had worked cattle his entire life, and it showed in the easy way he sat his horse, moving with the animal like they were one being. "Evening, Mrs. Reeves," he said, touching the brim of his hat as he reined in his horse near the porch. "Saw some fancy carriages heading back toward town earlier. Thought I might ride over and make sure everything was all right." Beatrice felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Travis had been a friend to both her and Thomas, and after Thomas died, he had helped her several times when her own hands were stretched too thin. "Railroad men," she said. "They want my land for their new line." Travis's expression darkened. "They've been to see Mr. Kincaid, too. He sold them a right-of-way across the northern section of the Circle K last month, said fighting them was not worth the trouble." "Well, I am not Mr. Kincaid," Beatrice said firmly. "This ranch is all I have left of Thomas. I am not giving it up." Travis dismounted, leading his horse to the water trough before walking up to the porch. Up close, she could see the concern in his blue eyes. "Mrs. Reeves, I admire your spirit, I truly do. But the railroad has deep pockets and friends in the territorial government. If they want your land badly enough, they will find a way to take it." "Let them try," Beatrice said, then sighed and gestured to the chair beside hers. "Sit down, Travis. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be fine, thank you." She went inside and returned with 2 cups of strong black coffee, the kind that cowboys preferred after long days in the saddle. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last of the sunset fade into twilight. "My husband always said this was the prettiest view in all of Arizona," Beatrice said quietly. "He would sit right here every evening, watching the sky change colors. I cannot imagine losing that." Travis looked at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken in a way she had not felt since before Thomas died. "Then we will figure out a way to make sure you do not have to," he said. "We?" Beatrice asked. "If you will have the help," Travis said. "The Circle K depends on the water that runs through your property. If the railroad comes in and starts blasting and digging, it could disrupt the whole watershed. Mr. Kincaid might be willing to sell out, but some of us still care about this land and the people on it." Beatrice felt unexpected tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. "I would appreciate any help you can offer," she said. Travis nodded. "First thing we need to do is find out exactly what legal standing they have. I know a lawyer in Phoenix, good man named Samuel Morton. He has dealt with the railroad before. I can ride into town tomorrow and ask him to look into this." "I can pay," Beatrice said quickly. "We can sort that out later," Travis said. "Right now, we need information." They talked for another hour as the stars came out overhead, vast and brilliant in the clear desert sky. Travis told her about similar situations he had heard of in Texas and New Mexico, cases where ranchers had fought the railroad and sometimes won. Beatrice found herself relaxing in his presence, appreciating not just his help but his company. It had been lonely these past 2 years, lonelier than she usually let herself admit. When Travis finally stood to leave, he paused at the porch steps. "Mrs. Reeves, I want you to know that you are not alone in this. Whatever happens, you have friends who will stand with you." "Thank you, Travis," she said. "And please call me Beatrice. I think we have known each other long enough for that." He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Only if you stop calling me Mr. Everett like I am some kind of banker. Deal, she said, returning the smile. She watched him ride away into the darkness, then went inside and locked the doors. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks, knowing she was not facing this fight entirely on her own. True to his word, Travis rode to Phoenix the next morning. He returned 3 days later with Samuel Morton in tow, a thin man in his 40s with wire-rimmed spectacles and a sharp legal mind. They sat in Beatrice's dining room, spreading maps and documents across the table. The situation is complex, Morton explained, adjusting his spectacles. The railroad does have the right to claim eminent domain for public works projects, but there are legal procedures they must follow. They cannot simply seize your property without proper compensation and due process. They offered me money, Beatrice said. Triple what the land is worth, they claimed. Morton nodded. That is standard procedure. They make what seems like a generous offer, and if you refuse, they go to the territorial courts and argue that they made a good faith effort to purchase the land. Then the court decides whether the public good of the railroad outweighs your property rights. And which way do those decisions usually go? Beatrice asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. In favor of the railroad, I am afraid, Morton said, but there are exceptions. If we can prove that their proposed route is not the most efficient option, or that taking your land would cause undue hardship, we might be able to force them to route around your property. What constitutes undue hardship? Travis asked. Well, the fact that Mrs. Reeves is a widow operating this ranch alone could work in our favor, Morton said. If we can demonstrate that losing this land would leave her destitute and that the railroad could reasonably use an alternate route, we have a case. Beatrice bristled slightly at being characterized as helpless, but she understood the legal strategy. What do we need to do? First, I need to file a formal objection with the Territorial Land Office, Morton said. That will slow down their process and force them to go through official channels rather than trying to pressure you into selling. Second, we need to document everything about this ranch, how it operates, how many people depend on it, the water rights, everything. The stronger our case that this ranch is vital and irreplaceable, the better our chances. They spent the rest of the day going through paperwork. Beatrice showed Morton the original land grant from the Mexican government that predated American control of the territory, deeds and water rights, contracts with the Army post at Fort McDowell where she sold beef cattle, employment records for her ranch hands. Travis helped her pull together years of documentation, often finding papers she had forgotten existed. As the afternoon wore on, Morton seemed increasingly pleased. This is good, he said. Very good. You have a long-established operation with deep roots in the community. That counts for something. How long will this legal process take? Beatrice asked. Morton hesitated. Months, possibly longer. The railroad will push for speed, but we can file motions for extensions, request surveys, demand environmental assessments of how their construction might affect your water supply. I can tie them up in paperwork for quite a while. But eventually they will get a court date, Travis said. Yes, Morton admitted. And when that happens, we will need to present the strongest possible case. I will not lie to you, Mrs. Reeves. This will be a difficult fight. The railroad has excellent lawyers and political connections, but you have right on your side, and that counts for something. After Morton left to begin filing the necessary paperwork, Beatrice and Travis stood on the porch in the fading light. She felt exhausted, overwhelmed by the complexity of the legal battle ahead. This is going to cost a fortune in legal fees, she said quietly. Morton is doing this mostly for expenses, Travis said. He does not like the way the railroad pushes people around. He has been waiting for someone willing to fight back. Beatrice looked at him. Why are you doing this, Travis? I mean truly. You said the water rights, but Mr. Kincaid already sold his right-of-way. The Circle K will be fine regardless of what happens to my ranch. Travis was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the darkening landscape. Mr. Kincaid is my employer, but this land matters to me more than it does to him. He sees it as business, profit, and loss. I see it as home, and I see you as someone worth helping. The way he said it made Beatrice's breath catch. There was something in his voice, a warmth that went beyond neighborly concern. She found herself very aware of how close he was standing, the familiar smell of leather and horse and sun-warmed cotton. I should go, Travis said, though he did not move. It is getting late. Stay for supper, Beatrice heard herself say. It is the least I can do after everything you have done for me. Travis smiled. I would like that. They ate beans and cornbread and beef that Beatrice had cooked that morning, simple fare but filling. Travis told her stories about working cattle drives in Texas before he came to Arizona, about storms and stampedes and the vast emptiness of the Llano Estacado. Beatrice found herself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in months. Thomas used to tell me stories like that, she said, then felt a pang of guilt for invoking her dead husband's name while enjoying another man's company so much. But Travis just nodded. He was a good man, Thomas. I respected him a great deal. He loved you very much. He talked about you all the time when we would meet up at the cattle auctions. Did he? Beatrice asked softly. Always. He said marrying you was the smartest thing he ever did, that you had a head for business and a heart big enough to hold the whole territory. Travis looked down at his plate. He made me promise once when he was sick toward the end that if anything happened to him, I would make sure you were all right. Beatrice felt tears threatening again. I did not know that. I probably should not have said anything, Travis said. I just wanted you to know that helping you is not just neighborly duty. It is a promise to a friend. They finished supper in comfortable silence, and then Travis helped her wash the dishes, which was such a domestic, intimate thing that it made Beatrice's heart race. His hands brushed against hers in the wash water, and she felt a jolt of awareness that was entirely different from what she had felt with Thomas, sharper somehow, more immediate. When Travis finally left that night, Beatrice stood on the porch and watched him ride away, and she admitted to herself what she had been trying not to acknowledge. She was developing feelings for Travis Everett, feelings that went well beyond gratitude, and that both terrified and exhilarated her. The next few weeks settled into a pattern. The railroad sent more representatives, less polite than Van Heflin had been. Men in suits appeared at her door with increasingly stern warnings about the futility of fighting. Beatrice turned them all away, sometimes with her Winchester for emphasis. Morton filed motion after motion with the territorial courts, slowing the railroad's legal progress to a crawl. Survey teams appeared on the edges of her property, marking out the proposed route, but Morton got an injunction preventing them from stepping foot on her actual land, until the court case was resolved. Travis came by nearly every evening after finishing his work at the Circle K. Sometimes he brought information Morton had requested. Sometimes he just came to check on her. They would sit on the porch and talk, or walk the property line discussing irrigation and cattle rotation, and 1,000 other mundane things that Beatrice found herself treasuring. She was falling in love with him. There was no other word for it. The way her heart jumped when she saw him riding up the road, the way she found herself watching for him as the afternoon wore on, the way his smile could lift the darkness that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her. It felt different from what she had felt for Thomas, which had grown slowly over years of friendship before turning into love. This was faster, more intense, like a flash flood in the desert washes. But she did not know what Travis felt. He was always kind, always helpful, but he never said anything or did anything that crossed the line of propriety. Beatrice sometimes wondered if he saw her only as his dead friend's widow, someone to protect and help but not to love. It was late July when everything changed. Beatrice was in the barn repairing a saddle when she heard shouting from the bunkhouse. She dropped the leather and ran outside to find her foreman, a grizzled cowboy named Pete Sullivan, arguing with three men she had never seen before. "Get off this property," Pete was saying, his hand on his revolver. "The boss lady does not want you here. We are not leaving until we talk to Mrs. Reeves," one of the strangers said. He was a hard-looking man with a scar across his cheek and eyes like chips of flint. "I am Mrs. Reeves," Beatrice said, walking up with what she hoped was more confidence than she felt. "And Pete is right. You are trespassing." The scarred man looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "My name is Jack Ridley. I work for the railroad doing jobs that the lawyers cannot handle. I am here to make you understand something, Mrs. Reeves. You are going to sell this land one way or another. You can take the money we offered and walk away clean, or you can keep fighting and things will get unpleasant." "Are you threatening me?" Beatrice asked, her voice ice cold. "I am explaining reality," Ridley said. "Accidents happen on ranches. Fires start. Cattle wander off or get sick. Hired hands decide they can find better work elsewhere. Widows living alone can be vulnerable to all sorts of misfortune." Pete's hand tightened on his revolver, and Beatrice saw her other ranch hands moving closer, drawn by the commotion. But they were outnumbered and outgunned if this turned violent. "I am not selling," Beatrice said. "Now leave before I have you arrested for trespassing and making threats." Ridley smiled, the expression not reaching his cold eyes. "You have been warned, Mrs. Reeves. Do not say we did not give you a chance to do this the easy way." He and his men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving Beatrice shaking with anger and fear. Pete turned to her, his weathered face concerned. "Boss, those are not lawyers and surveyors. Those are hired guns. The railroad is playing for keeps now." "I know," Beatrice said. "Get the men together. I want someone watching the property at all times, especially at night. Any strangers show up, I want to know about it immediately." She went back to the house and penned a quick note to Samuel Morton, telling him about the threats. Then she saddled her own horse and rode north toward the Circle K, toward Travis. She found him working with a young horse in the breaking corral, patient and calm as the animal learned to accept a saddle. When he saw her riding in hard, he immediately tied off the horse and came to meet her. "What happened?" he asked, taking in her expression. She told him about Ridley and the threats. As she spoke, she saw Travis's jaw tighten, his hands curling into fists. "They sent Jack Ridley," he said quietly. "That is bad, Beatrice. Ridley has a reputation from Colorado to Texas. He is the man the railroad calls when they want to scare someone into selling." "Well, I am not scared," Beatrice said, though her trembling hands suggested otherwise. Travis reached out and took her hands in his, steadying them. The touch sent electricity through her. "You should be," he said gently. "Being brave does not mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and standing your ground anyway, but you do not have to do this alone." "What can we do against men like that?" Beatrice asked. "I have ranch hands, good men, but they are not gunfighters." "Neither am I," Travis said. "But I know someone who is. There is a man named Clay Bridger, lives up in Prescott. He used to be a lawman, Texas Ranger, then a deputy marshal in the territory. He is retired now, but he does not like bullies, and he particularly does not like the railroad. If I send for him, he might be willing to help." "I cannot ask you to do that," Beatrice said. "You are not asking," Travis said. "I am offering. Beatrice, I care about what happens to you and your ranch. Let me help." The way he said it, the intensity in his blue eyes, made Beatrice's heart pound. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Travis was quiet for a long moment, still holding her hands. "Because when I ride over that ridge and see your ranch house in the distance, it feels like coming home," he finally said. "Because when I sit on your porch and watch the sunset, I feel more at peace than I have anywhere else in my life. And because when I look at you, I see the strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, and the thought of anything happening to you makes me want to tear the world apart." Beatrice felt like she could not breathe. "Travis, I am a widow. People would talk if we—" "I do not care what people say," Travis said. "I care about you. I have been trying not to feel this way, telling myself it was too soon, that I should not dishonor Thomas's memory. But I cannot help it, Beatrice. I am in love with you." She kissed him. It was impulsive and improper and absolutely right. His arms came around her, strong and secure, and for the first time since Thomas died, Beatrice felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Travis rested his forehead against hers. "I will send for Clay Bridger," he said. "And I will spend every night at your ranch until he gets here, sleeping in the bunkhouse with your hands. Nobody is going to hurt you or drive you off your land." "The whole territory will know," Beatrice said. "Let them know," Travis said. "I am done hiding how I feel." Clay Bridger arrived a week later, riding a big black horse and carrying a pair of well-worn Colt revolvers. He was a man in his early 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much violence. But when Travis introduced him to Beatrice, he took off his hat and gave her a courteous nod. "Madam, Travis tells me you are having trouble with the Southern Pacific," he said. "That is one way to put it," Beatrice said. "They want my land and are willing to do just about anything to get it." "Railroad companies are all the same," Bridger said. "They think their money and connections put them above the law. Sometimes they need to be reminded otherwise. If you do not mind, I would like to take a look around your property, get a sense of the layout." Over the next few days, Bridger transformed the ranch into something more defensible. He had the men clear sight lines, set up watch positions, and establish a system of signals in case of trouble. He also made a very visible ride into Fort McDowell and had a long conversation with the Army commander there, a Captain Hargrove who had been buying Beatrice's beef for 2 years. "Hargrove says if there is any violence, he will send troops," Bridger reported back. "The Army does not like the railroad trying to push around their suppliers. That should give Ridley and his boys pause." It did for a while. 2 weeks passed without incident. The legal wrangling continued, with Morton filing motion after motion and the railroad's lawyers fighting back. A court date was finally set for late October, 3 months away. During those weeks, Beatrice and Travis grew closer. He moved into the bunkhouse officially, working her ranch alongside her hands during the day and standing watch at night. They stole moments together whenever they could, walking along the creek that ran through her property, sharing meals, talking about everything and nothing. One evening in early September, they walked up to a high point on her land where you could see for miles in every direction. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Thomas and I used to come up here," Beatrice said. "He proposed to me right on this spot." Travis stiffened slightly, and Beatrice turned to him. "I am not trying to compare you to him," she said gently. "You are two very different men. I love Thomas and I always will, but he is gone and I am still here, still living. And I love you, Travis, differently than I loved him, but just as deeply." Travis pulled her close. "I think Thomas would approve," he said. "He wanted you to be happy." "I am happy," Beatrice said, and realized it was true. Despite the threat hanging over her ranch, despite the legal battles and the hired guns, she was genuinely happy for the first time in 2 years. They were kissing, wrapped up in each other against the backdrop of the sunset, when Beatrice heard a sound that did not belong. She pulled away from Travis, listening. "Smoke," she said. "I smell smoke." They turned and looked down at the ranch. Flames were rising from the barn. Travis cursed, and they ran down the hillside, slipping and sliding on the loose rock. By the time they reached the ranch yard, the barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the darkening sky. Her ranch hands were forming a bucket brigade from the well, but it was clear the barn was lost. The focus now was on keeping the fire from spreading to the other buildings. Beatrice ran to help, grabbing buckets and hauling water until her arms screamed and her dress was soaked. Beside her, Travis worked with grim determination, his face streaked with soot. Clay Bridger was everywhere, directing the men, making sure the wind did not carry embers to the house or bunkhouse. It took 2 hours to get the fire under control. The barn was a total loss, reduced to smoking timbers and ash. 3 of her horses had been in the barn and had to be shot, too badly burned to save. Beatrice stood looking at the destruction, feeling numb. "It was Ridley," Clay said, walking up to her. "Found boot prints near the back of the barn and what looks like a kerosene can." They waited until dark, figured everyone would be settling in for the night, and set the fire. "Did anyone see them?" Travis asked. "No," Clay said grimly. "They were professionals, in and out without being spotted." Beatrice felt rage building beneath the numbness. "This is my answer, then. Burn me out if I will not sell." "They are trying to break you," Travis said. "Make you feel like fighting is pointless." "Well, it is not working," Beatrice said, her voice hard. "Tomorrow morning I want you to ride into Fort McDowell, Travis. Tell Captain Hargrove what happened. And Clay, I want you to go to Phoenix and tell Morton. I want everyone to know that the railroad is using arson and terror against a widow who is just trying to keep her home. The newspapers will love that story," Clay said with a thin smile. "Railroad company terrorizing helpless widow." Public opinion can be a powerful weapon. Over the next week, the story of the barn burning spread across the territory. Morton leaked it to the Phoenix Herald, and the story was picked up by papers in Tucson and as far away as Albuquerque. Suddenly, Beatrice's fight against the railroad became a symbol of individual rights against corporate power. Support came from unexpected places. Neighboring ranchers who had stayed neutral began bringing supplies and offering to help rebuild her barn. The Fort McDowell post commander assigned a detail of soldiers to patrol the area, making it clear that further violence would not be tolerated. Even the territorial governor, James McKenzie, issued a statement saying that while he supported economic development, it had to be done within the law. The railroad's lawyers tried to paint Beatrice as a troublemaker standing in the way of progress, but public opinion was against them. The image of a young widow standing up to a powerful corporation resonated with people who felt pushed around by forces beyond their control. Van Heflin showed up again in mid-September, this time without the hard men, just him and a lawyer. Beatrice received them on her porch, with Travis standing beside her and Clay Bridger leaning against a post looking dangerous. "Mrs. Reeves," Van Heflin said, looking far less confident than he had on his first visit. "The incident with your barn was most unfortunate. I want to assure you that the railroad had nothing to do with it." "The man who set the fire works for you," Beatrice said flatly. "We employ many people. We cannot control all their actions," Van Heflin blustered. "Cut the nonsense," Clay said. You sent Jack Ridley and his boys to scare her. It backfired. Now the whole territory knows what kind of tactics you people use." Van Heflin's face reddened. "See here, we came to make a new offer. 5 times the land's appraised value, plus compensation for your barn and livestock. That is more than fair." "My answer is still no," Beatrice said. "Mrs. Reeves, please be reasonable. We can route around your property, but it will cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars and delay the line by 6 months. All because you are being stubborn." "All because this is my home," Beatrice corrected. "And I am not giving it up. Not for 5 times its value, not for 10 times. The railroad will have to find another route." Van Heflin looked at her, at Travis, at the armed Clay Bridger, and seemed to realize he was not going to win this confrontation. "The court will decide," he said stiffly. "And I assure you we have the law on our side." "We will see," Beatrice said. After they left, Travis put his arm around her shoulders. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was terrified," Beatrice admitted. "But I meant what I said. I am not giving up my home." The weeks leading up to the court date in late October were tense. The railroad made no more overt moves against Beatrice, but the pressure continued in subtle ways. Anonymous letters appeared warning her of the consequences of defying the railroad. Strangers were seen watching the ranch from a distance. Pete Sullivan reported that someone had tried to bribe one of the younger ranch hands to quit, though the boy had refused. Through it all, Travis was her rock. He worked beside her every day, helping to rebuild the barn with lumber they bought in Phoenix, tending cattle, mending fences. At night they would sit together and talk about the future, about what they would do when this was all over. "I have been thinking," Travis said one evening. "After the court case, regardless of how it goes, I want to leave the Circle K. Mr. Kincaid is a good employer, but this is not my land. I want to build something of my own." "What would you do?" Beatrice asked. Travis was quiet for a moment. "I was hoping maybe I could build it here," he said. "With you, if you would have me." Beatrice's heart swelled. "Travis, are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking you to marry me," Travis said. "I know it might seem fast, and I know people will talk about Thomas not being gone that long. But I love you, Beatrice, and I want to spend my life with you. I want to help you run this ranch, to build a home and a family together, if you will have me." Beatrice kissed him, deep and long. "Yes," she said when they finally broke apart. "Yes, I will marry you." They decided to wait until after the court case to make it official, not wanting to give the railroad's lawyers any ammunition about her being a helpless widow who needed a man. But privately, they were engaged, and Beatrice wore a simple silver ring that had belonged to Travis's mother, carried all the way from Texas. The court date arrived on a crisp October morning. Beatrice, Travis, and Samuel Morton made the journey to Prescott, the territorial capital, where the case would be heard before Judge William Marsh. The courthouse was packed with spectators, newspaper reporters, and representatives from both sides. The railroad's case was presented by a silver-tongued lawyer named Harrison Blackwell, who argued that the public good of connecting Phoenix to Fort McDowell via rail far outweighed one woman's sentimental attachment to her land. He presented surveys showing that routing around Beatrice's property would add significant cost and delay, potentially affecting economic development across the territory. Morton countered by presenting the history of the ranch, the Mexican land grant that predated American control, the water rights that supported not just Beatrice's operation but several downstream ranches, and the contracts with the Army that showed the ranch provided vital supplies. He also brought up the barn burning, suggesting that a company willing to use such tactics was not acting in good faith. Beatrice was called to testify. She sat in the witness box, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom on her, and answered Morton's questions about the ranch, about Thomas, about her determination to keep her home. "Mrs. Reeves," Morton asked gently, "what does this ranch mean to you?" "It is everything," Beatrice said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My husband and I built this life together. Every fence post, every irrigation ditch, every building represents years of work and love. This is not just property to me. It is my home, my livelihood, and my connection to the man I loved. The railroad sees it as an obstacle, a problem to be solved with money or force. But to me, it is irreplaceable." Blackwell Cross examined her, trying to paint her as unreasonable and standing in the way of progress. But Beatrice held her ground, calm and articulate, and she could see the jury being swayed. The trial lasted 3 days. On the final day, Judge Marsh called both parties before him. "I have given this matter considerable thought," he said. "The railroad makes a valid argument about the public benefit of their proposed route. However, I am deeply troubled by the evidence suggesting intimidation and possible arson. More fundamentally, I am not convinced that the railroad has exhausted all reasonable alternatives." He looked at the railroad's lawyers. "Your own surveys show 3 possible routes for this section of track. Mrs. Reeves's property is the most direct, but the alternatives are feasible, merely more expensive. In the absence of compelling evidence that her property is the only viable option, I cannot in good conscience authorize the use of eminent domain to take her land." Beatrice felt Travis's hand squeeze hers as the judge continued. "Therefore, I am ruling in favor of Mrs. Reeves. The railroad must choose an alternate route. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into the barn fire and the activities of railroad employees in this matter. If evidence of criminal wrongdoing is found, charges will be filed." The courtroom erupted in noise. Beatrice sat frozen, hardly believing what she had heard. They had won. She had won. Morton was grinning ear to ear. Travis pulled her into a fierce embrace right there in the courtroom, not caring who saw. Clay Bridger, sitting in the back, gave her a respectful nod. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Beatrice gave a brief statement thanking the judge for his wisdom and expressing hope that the railroad would respect the decision. Then she and Travis escaped to the hotel where they were staying. That night, they celebrated quietly in the hotel restaurant, joined by Morton and Clay. "This is going to set precedent," Morton said, raising his glass. "Other landowners facing the railroad will be able to point to this case. You did not just save your ranch, Mrs. Reeves. You struck a blow for property rights across the territory." "I just wanted to keep my home," Beatrice said, "but I am glad it might help others." After dinner, Travis walked Beatrice back to her room. They stood outside her door, suddenly awkward now that the fight was over and the future stretched before them. "So," Travis said, "we won." "We did," Beatrice said. "And you agreed to marry me," Travis said. "I did," Beatrice said, smiling. "How do you feel about getting married soon?" Travis asked. "I know we talked about waiting, but now that the case is over, I do not see any reason to delay." Beatrice pretended to consider. "Well, I suppose I am free next Saturday if you can arrange everything by then." Travis laughed and kissed her. "I will get it done," he promised. They were married on the first Saturday in November, in a small ceremony at the Fort McDowell Chapel. Captain Hargrove gave Beatrice away, and Clay Bridger stood up as Travis's best man. All of her ranch hands attended, along with neighbors from surrounding ranches and several officers from the fort. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress, and Travis wore his best suit. When the chaplain pronounced them man and wife and Travis kissed her, Beatrice felt a joy so complete it brought tears to her eyes. The reception was held at the ranch, in the newly rebuilt barn. Someone brought a fiddle, someone else a guitar, and they danced late into the night under lanterns hung from the rafters. Beatrice danced with Travis, with Clay, with Pete Sullivan and Captain Hargrove, and all the men who had stood by her through the fight. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Travis led Beatrice outside. The November night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I have been in a very long time," Beatrice said. "Thank you, Travis, for everything. For helping me save this place, for standing with me, for loving me." "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done," Travis said. He pulled her close, and they stood together looking at the ranch house, the barn, the corrals, all of it bathed in starlight. "This is ours now," Beatrice said. "Not just mine, ours." "How does that feel?" "Like coming home," Travis said. They moved into the main house together, combining their lives in countless small ways. Travis brought his few possessions from the Circle K bunkhouse where he had lived for years. Beatrice made room in the closet for his clothes, on the shelves for his books. They rearranged the furniture, making the space theirs rather than hers or a shrine to her life with Thomas. It felt right. The house came alive again with Travis in it, with his laughter and his presence and the sound of his boots on the floorboards each evening when he came in from working the ranch. The railroad grudgingly accepted the court's decision and began surveying an alternate route that looped north around Beatrice's property. Van Heflin sent a stiff letter offering to purchase a small easement for a service road, which Beatrice and Travis considered and ultimately accepted for a fair price. It seemed like a reasonable compromise now that the railroad had given up trying to take the entire ranch. Jack Ridley and two of his associates were arrested in connection with the barn burning. A ranch hand from a neighboring property came forward saying he had seen them near Beatrice's barn the night of the fire. Ridley was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in the territorial prison in Yuma. The railroad company publicly disavowed his actions, though everyone knew they had hired him. Life settled into a new rhythm. Travis officially became co-owner of the ranch, and they worked side by side expanding the operation. They bought more cattle, improved the irrigation system, and negotiated a bigger contract with the Army for beef deliveries. In February of 1884, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Travis one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the same spot where she had first told him she would marry him. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly nervous about how he would react. Travis pulled her into his arms, his face alight with joy. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "I am going to be a father." "Yes, you are," Beatrice said, laughing and crying at the same time. Their son was born in October of 1884, a healthy baby boy with his father's blue eyes and a remarkable set of lungs. They named him Thomas Michael Everett, honoring both Beatrice's late husband and Travis's father. Holding little Thomas for the first time, Beatrice felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. She looked at Travis, saw the wonder and love in his expression as he gazed at their son, and knew that this was what she had fought for. Not just the land, but the life they could build on it, the family they could raise, the future they could create together. Clay Bridger came to visit when the baby was 3 weeks old, bringing a hand-carved wooden horse as a gift. "He is a fine boy," Clay said, looking at the sleeping infant. "You two did good." "We had help," Beatrice said. "We could not have won without you, Clay." "Nonsense," Clay said. "You won because you were willing to stand and fight. I just provided a little backup. Besides, it did my heart good to see the railroad get their noses bloodied for once." Clay stayed for a week, helping with the work while Beatrice recovered from childbirth. Before he left, he pulled Travis aside. "You take care of them," he said. That woman fought half the territory to keep this place. She is tougher than most men I have known, but everybody needs someone to stand with them." "I will," Travis promised, "for the rest of my life." The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under Travis and Beatrice's joint management. They added more acreage, bought breeding stock, and developed a reputation for quality cattle that commanded premium prices. In 1886, they had a daughter, Emily Rose, who had her mother's determination and her father's easy smile. 2 years later came another son, James, who from the moment he could walk seemed determined to climb everything in sight. The house rang with children's laughter, with the chaos of family meals, with bedtime stories and birthday celebrations, and all the ordinary magic of a life well lived. Beatrice sometimes stood in the kitchen or on the porch and marveled at how much had changed since that day the railroad men first came to demand her land. The fight with the railroad became a story they told around the dinner table, a piece of family history. Little Thomas loved hearing about how his mother had stood on the porch with a rifle, how his father had helped her fight the big company, how Judge Marsh had ruled in their favor. "Were you scared, Mama?" Emily asked once. "Terrified," Beatrice admitted. "But sometimes you have to do what is right even when you are afraid." Travis reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently. Even after years of marriage, his touch still sent warmth through her. The railroad line was eventually completed in 1885, looping around their property as the court had mandated. It brought increased commerce to the region, and Beatrice had to admit that the economic development was good for the territory. But she never regretted fighting to keep her land. This was home, the place where she had loved Thomas, where she had fallen in love with Travis, where they were raising their children. In the spring of 1890, 7 years after the court battle, Van Heflin showed up at the ranch again. Beatrice was hanging laundry when she saw the carriage approaching, and her first instinct was still alarm. But Travis came out of the barn, and together they walked to meet the railroad man. Van Heflin looked older, grayer, and oddly humbled. "Mr. and Mrs. Everett," he said, tipping his hat. "I hope I am not intruding." "That depends on why you are here," Travis said evenly. "I am retiring from the railroad," Van Heflin said. "Moving back east to live with my daughter. Before I go, I wanted to come here and apologize." Beatrice was too surprised to speak. Travis said, "Apologize for what exactly?" "For everything," Van Heflin said. "For the threats, the pressure, for hiring men like Jack Ridley. I told myself I was just doing my job, that the railroad's needs justified the means. But I was wrong. What we did to you, Mrs. Everett, what we tried to do was wrong, and I have regretted it ever since." He pulled out an envelope. "The railroad asked me to deliver this. It is a formal apology from the company president, along with a check to compensate you for your legal fees and the barn we destroyed. No strings attached, no expectation of any kind, just an acknowledgement that we were in the wrong." Beatrice took the envelope, still too stunned to process what was happening. Van Heflin continued, "For what it is worth, your case changed how the railroad approaches land acquisition. We now make genuine efforts to find alternate routes before forcing people out. You made a difference, Mrs. Everett." "Mrs. Reeves Everett," Beatrice corrected gently. "I kept my first husband's name as part of mine. He built this ranch too." Van Heflin nodded. "Mrs. Reeves Everett, then. I wish you and your family all the best. This is beautiful land. I am glad you got to keep it." After he left, Beatrice and Travis stood looking at the envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter from the railroad president expressing regret for the company's actions. "Well," Travis said, "that was unexpected." "It was," Beatrice agreed. She looked at the check, then at the ranch spread out around them, then at Travis. "You know what? Let's use this money to build a new bunkhouse for the hands and maybe a proper schoolhouse for the children. Turn something that came from ugliness into something good." Travis smiled. "That is exactly what we will do." The years continued to pass, measured in roundups and harvests, in children's birthdays and anniversary celebrations, in the slow accumulation of a life well lived. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved books and learning. Emily became a skilled rider who could rope a calf as well as any of the ranch hands. James developed his father's easy way with horses. In 1892, they added twin boys to the family, Daniel and David, who were inseparable from birth, and seemed to communicate in a language only they understood. The ranch house was expanded to accommodate the growing family, with bedrooms added and a larger kitchen built. Beatrice sometimes woke in the pre-dawn darkness, listening to Travis breathing beside her and the quiet sounds of their children sleeping in nearby rooms, and felt such profound gratitude it brought tears to her eyes. She had lost so much when Thomas died, had nearly lost everything when the railroad came. But she had fought for what mattered, and in fighting had found a new love, a new life, a future richer than she could have imagined. Travis seemed to sense when these moods took her. He would pull her close, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "I love you." "I love you too," she would whisper back and mean it with every fiber of her being. The ranch continued to prosper. By the mid-1890s, they were one of the largest cattle operations in central Arizona, employing 20 ranch hands and running thousands of head of cattle. They bought out 2 neighboring ranches when the owners retired, expanding their holdings to over 10,000 acres. But it was not about the size or the success, not really. It was about the life they had built, the family they were raising, the legacy they were creating. On summer evenings, they would gather on the porch, the whole family, and watch the sun set over the Mazatzel Mountains. Travis would tell stories about cattle drives and wild horses. Beatrice would talk about the early days of the ranch, about Thomas and the work they had done together, about the fight with the railroad. The children would listen, rapt, learning the history of the land they lived on and the values their parents held dear. Stand up for what is right. Work hard. Treat people fairly. Defend what matters. In 1898, Thomas the Younger, now 13 years old, asked his mother about the railroad fight. "Were you ever sorry you fought them?" he asked. "It would have been so much money. You could have bought a different ranch." Beatrice looked at her son, seeing in his eyes the same determination that had driven her to stand on the porch with a Winchester all those years ago. "Not for one second," she said. "Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was scary. But some things are worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible. This land, this home, your family's future, those things matter more than any amount of money." "What if you had lost?" Thomas asked. "Then I would have fought with everything I had and could walk away knowing I gave it my all," Beatrice said. "But I did not lose. We did not lose. Your father and I and everyone who helped us. We won because we stood together and refused to back down." Travis, listening from his chair, added, "That is the important part, son. Your mother did not fight alone. She had people who believed in her and stood with her. That is what community means. That is what love means." Young Thomas nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the lesson. The turn of the century came, 1900 arriving with celebration and hope. Arizona was changing, growing, moving toward statehood. The wild days of the frontier were fading into memory, replaced by a more settled, civilized society. But some things remained constant. The ranch endured, generation to generation. Beatrice and Travis raised their 5 children to adulthood, saw them educated and married and starting families of their own. Thomas the Younger became a lawyer, inspired by Samuel Morton's work on his mother's behalf. Emily married a rancher from Payson and raised horses. James took over day-to-day operations of the ranch, working alongside his aging father. The twins went into business together, opening a successful mercantile in Phoenix, but always returning to the ranch for holidays and celebrations. By 1905, Beatrice was 48 years old, her dark hair shot through with silver, her hands weathered from years of work. Travis was 50, his face lined but his eyes still the same brilliant blue that had captured her heart 2 decades earlier. They sat on the porch one evening, watching their grandchildren play in the yard while James and his wife supervised. "You ever think about how different life could have been?" Travis asked. "Sometimes," Beatrice admitted. "If I had sold to the railroad, if I had given up when they burned the barn, if you had not come to help me." "But you did not sell, you did not give up, and I did come to help," Travis said. "And look at what we built." Beatrice looked at the ranch spread out before them, at the grandchildren laughing in the fading light, at her son working in the corral with the same patient skill his father had taught him. She looked at the barn that had been rebuilt, the house that had been expanded, the land that had been fought for and won and cherished. "We built a good life," she said. "We built a great life," Travis corrected, pulling her close. "And I would not change a single moment of it." They sat together as the stars came out, the same stars that had witnessed their first tentative connection, their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, and every moment in between. The desert night was cool and clear, filled with the chirping of crickets and the distant call of coyotes. "I love you," Beatrice said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Travis said. "Always have, always will." In the house, lamps were being lit, casting warm golden light through the windows. Someone was starting supper, the smell of cooking drifting out onto the porch. A child's voice called for Grandma, and Beatrice smiled. "Duty calls," she said, starting to rise. Travis caught her hand. "One more minute," he said. "Let me just sit here with you one more minute, looking at everything we have." So they sat, hand in hand, two people who had found each other in the midst of crisis and built something beautiful. The ranch that Beatrice had fought so hard to keep had become more than just land, more than just property. It had become a home, a legacy, a testament to courage and love and the power of standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds. The railroad had wanted her land, and she had refused to sell. She had stood alone against the whole company, but she had not stayed alone. Travis had come, and Clay and Samuel Morton, and all the people who believed in her and what she was fighting for. Together they had won, not just the court case, but something far more valuable. They had won the right to build a life on their own terms, to raise a family in the place they loved, to leave a legacy that would endure for generations. The grandchildren playing in the yard would grow up hearing the stories, would understand that their family's land had been earned through struggle and defended with courage. And someday, when they faced their own battles, they would remember. They would remember Beatrice Reeves Everett, who stood on a porch with a rifle and refused to surrender her home. They would remember Travis Everett, who loved a widow and helped her fight the most powerful company in the territory. They would remember that some things are worth fighting for, and that with courage and love and determination, even impossible odds can be overcome. As the years continued to roll forward, the ranch remained in the family, passed down from James to his children and eventually to his grandchildren. The original house was preserved, the porch where Beatrice and Travis had shared so many sunsets maintained as a family shrine. The story of the railroad fight became family legend, told and retold, growing richer with each generation. Beatrice lived to be 73 years old, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1930 with Travis beside her, and her children and grandchildren gathered around. Travis followed her just 8 months later, as if he could not bear to be without her for long. They were buried together on a hillside overlooking the ranch, beneath a monument that read Beatrice Reeves Everett and Travis Everett, who built a legacy of love and courage. But their real monument was not made of stone. It was the ranch itself, still operating, still thriving, still in family hands more than a century after Beatrice first refused to sell. It was the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their values. It was the story that lived on, inspiring new generations to stand up for what they believed in. The railroad line they had fought ran past the northern edge of the property, a reminder of the battle won. But it was just a footnote now, a piece of history dwarfed by the larger story of two people who found each other in the midst of crisis and built something that would last forever. On summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Mazatzal Mountains and paints the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson, if you stand in just the right spot on that ranch, you can almost feel their presence. Beatrice with her fierce determination and loving heart, Travis with his quiet strength and unwavering support. Two souls who found each other against all odds and proved that love, courage, and determination can overcome any obstacle. The railroad wanted her land, and she would not sell. But in fighting to keep it, she won so much more than property. She won a future, a family, a love story that would endure for generations. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money in the world.